what I just said is the most robust defense of the African Union. People need to understand that this is not bashing the African Union. This is the most robust defense. We created a union. We did not empower that union. We did not cede any sovereignty to that union to really be able to. They did not cede that. And we did not fund it. And then we expect a lot from that African Union. So that I'm actually in defense of the African Union. I wish it has the power, the tools, the funding, then we'd have one central authority to talk to and to get things moving.
More to your point about, turning it into an NGO, I actually liked it a lot. Now, here is the story. Maybe if the African Union gets actually its budget from its own people, then you might balance when it comes to who are they going to listen to, the presidents or the people? Who is funding? People, president, Now you just have president, right? So at the end of the day, it might also create some form of a greater distribution in terms of who, beyond who are my constituents, who exactly should I report to as to what did I do with the money? So it might be an idea to explore, but beyond those points, I think we were talking about something earlier about power differentials, about the power of the African Union when it comes to go and discuss. Reality is, we're tiny countries, and if we don't empower, like you say, the African Union, then you still have that power differentials. And my sense is, until we get this one Africa, this 2063 vision of we are one African or nation, right? It will always be like that until we enter that direction. And we don't have to start at 54. You can start with 7 countries, 10, and you progress like that. Europe did it. But what is very different between Europe and any other continent with Africa? Every one of you have watched the World Cup in South Africa, right? Ghana, 1 billion people was behind that team. That's African unity. If you see France playing Brazil, Germany in the World Cup final, no one is going to, the Germans are not going to support them, the Italians are not going to support them. Same for Brazil and Mexico. Africa has something that people are negating. It's bottom, it's people. They feel African, right? You might have tensions, etc. And unless we give that leadership back and that voice back to those who feel African and who wants to drive it, then you'll have that top down and hit a bottleneck. And it's been hitting a bottleneck systematically. So what we're trying to do as civil society, working with Farm Africa Solidarity, with African Indian Leaders Forum, with you, Ibrahim, is to say leadership today is spread. And unless we kind of empower at all level, then yes, you're not going to move forward. And it's something very fundamental in my view, right? So funding the African Union, don't expect the states to do it. Most of them are bankrupt anyway. Right? And you do have people who are successful in the private sector. Who care? Why? The point is simple. We have been busy for 50 years thriving in a bottle and taking glory for being successful in a bottle. Let's turn the bottle into an ocean. Then we can really talk. And then you can have a powerful African Union engaging with Europe, engaging with the United States and with China. But let's bring the people into it.
Let me ask you this quick question. Which country are you from?
Very complex question.
Okay, pick
I
one.
got a few, but technically I'm from
Okay, just for the purpose of an argument.
I'm Cameroonian.
You're Cameroonian.
Yeah.
Do you know your representative at the Pan-African Parliament?
No, I haven't had the chance to meet with him. I tried to reach him, but I couldn't find him.
Okay. I mean, please, go ahead. No, the reason why I asked that question simply is because, I mean, if I was to honestly take a show of hands of the Africans who are in this audience, do you know who your representative at the Pan-African Parliament is?
We did vote for them.
Did you even know there was one? I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, there are times when I almost forget that there is. Oh, by the way, there is a Pan-African Parliament. I'm just being frank and honest about that.
Yeah, just to build a little bit on my colleague here, made some very good points. Without offering a solution, I think fundamentally we also need to interrogate citizens' rights, right? So how do you expect the government to operate when you're not paying taxes? It's an obligation, right? The money needs to come from somewhere. So yes, resources need to be better managed, But what is the role of the citizens also in negotiating how those resources are better managed? Revenues need to be paid. Our economies, as was earlier pointed out, over 80% is informal. We need to change that, but people also need to feel, I want to pay. So make it easier for me to pay my taxes so that I can demand the services in return. So just as a commentary.
But don't you find that for many African people it's the reverse? It's because there's such a lack of accountability in the way in which their public funds are being spent that they're unwilling to pay those debts.
It's two-edged sword. Yeah.
You hadn't finished your point, I'm sorry.
No, the second thing that I just wanted to highlight, again, just as a reality check and the importance of data is, again, building on this point that Africa is growing from a small base and is really small. We're still globally insignificant, right? In total, we account for less than 5% of global trade, as was earlier pointed out. If that's our reality, we really need to think really hard about how we expand this resource base so that we can expand our ability to operate and implement the plans that we put in place.
Amadou.
Yes. I just want to stress that having institutions is an important thing. And I would, disagree with my brother Mamadou. This African Union have to be funded by our own governments. Because at the end of the day, you need that kind of accountability. Our governments need to fund it, not our people. That's not our job to fund our continental institutions. So that's a very important point. And maybe we should demand it. Maybe in each country, you need to have a movement which says, well, we must fund the African Union appropriately and adequately. And that's something we need to do because it's important to have that, that accountability level because that's institution. It's important. Now, the other point is really about, when would we start as a continent, as Africa, to start telling our institutions, local institutions, I mean by this government, whether it is parliament or, whether it is the legislative bodies, etc. This is absolutely not right and we need to do something about it. And I'll go back to the visa issue. In West Africa, it's true. Those of us who are in ECOWAS, we can go anywhere. Not only go, but also you also even have the right to establish, which is important. I am from Senegal. I go to Kenya, Nairobi, where I live. If I use my Senegalese passport, I cannot get the visa at the border.
That's strange.
If I use an American passport, I'll get the visa at the border.
For Senegal?
For Senegal, I'm telling you.
Same for Cameroon.
That's
Actually,
strange,
there's
because I'm
three
from
countries.
Ghana and I can walk into Kenya.
There's three. No, Nigeria is no longer, but there are three countries: Mali, Cameroon, and Senegal. You can't have a visa at port of entry.
You can't possibly be worse than Ghanaians.
Well, you said it.
Can I just say something? About the issue. You guys making a big song and dance about the funding of the Africa. This is not a huge budget for 54 countries. I'll give you a small example. I was in Beijing recently, some bank meeting, etc. And there was a big whole celebration. And I would go around shaking hands, and this guy say, oh, I am the Nigerian ambassador. This guy, oh, I am the Tanzanian ambassador. Oh, this guy, I'm the... And I looked and said, wow, we have 52 or 54 ambassadors here in Beijing, in one country. And I then started to calculate, how much is that costing us? We are paying as Africans for 52 embassies in Beijing, and we are paying for 53 ambassadors. Each one must have a decent house, each one driving a Mercedes car or a BMW car with a driver. Then they have political officers, they have this first secretary, second secretary. I just said, how many millions of dollars each embassy costing us in Beijing? We have 52 or 53 of those guys. America or Germany has only one guy, one embassy. But we African, because we are very poor, of course we can afford that. So we have 52 there. You go to Brussels, you go to New York actually, America have two, because you have one in the United Nations and you have one in Washington, And how much is that costing you? Wouldn't it be wonderful one day that the African Union just send one ambassador to Beijing representing all of Africa interests? Is that possible? How much saving we would make there? Why you need to do this some very small countries, they don't have the, how much that costing you? And the cost of one embassy is more than your contribution to the African Union. And then we say, oh, we don't have the money to pay the African Union. Come on.
Mo, if you don't mind, I just want to ask could we kindly get a microphone over here and you know, the former Director General of the World Trade Organization, and we're speaking in a hypothetical sense, if you wouldn't mind. I mean, we're talking about African unity, and I just wonder if you could step out of the role that you played as DG of the WTO. If in a hypothetical situation you had one high trade representative for the continent, would it bring the continent far more clout? Do you think that when the decisions are being made, people would be forced to recognize the role of the continent, that the doors would be forced open and the negotiations would not be behind closed doors and Africa being excluded? I just want you to speak hypothetically, if that would work. I'm just thinking.
My answer to that question is a frank no.
Why not?
The problem of Africa in the international system, at least in the international trade system, is not that it does not speak with one voice. The coordination of the African group in Geneva within WTO is extremely well done. There's nothing like a country saying something that's a member, an African member of WTO, and another doing something different on global trade issues. So, in this area, because trade is so fundamentally important for all countries, the experience is that Africa is united. What could be an improvement would be speaking not only with one voice, but with one mouth, which is